He could have spoken. Just one sentence. One interruption, and everything would have stopped, but the room was full. The music was loud, and silence felt safer than the truth. This is not a story about cruelty. It's a story about the cost of saying nothing. This didn't happen in private. It happened in front of everyone. The hall was beautiful. Not in the way beauty lives in nature, wild and effortless, but in the kind of beauty money buys on purpose. Every detail had been arranged to say the same thing. We made it. White flowers lined the aisle in thick, confident rows, their petals so fresh they looked unreal under the lights. Soft gold bulbs hung from the ceiling like captured starlight, warming the room with a glow that flattered every face and softened every flaw. Even the air smelled expensive sweet perfume, polished wood, fresh fabric, champagne. Everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to. And that was the point. Because for Tunda Dayami, this day wasn't just a wedding. It was proof. Proof that he wasn't the barefoot boy from a cramped room in Ibadan anymore. Proof that he wasn't the child people pitied, the one they spoke about in low voices when his mother wasn't close enough to hear. Proof that struggle could be outgrown, that shame could be outpaced, that a man could climb so high the past would finally have to look up at him. His name was Tund. He stood at the front, dressed in a tailored suit the color of midnight, the kind of fabric that didn't wrinkle, the kind of cut that made him look like he belonged in rooms where decisions were made. His hands were folded neatly in front of him, but his fingers pressed together too tightly. His heart raced, not from fear, but from something brighter, anticipation, the kind that tastes like victory. This was his day. A day he had worked years for. A day meant to erase his past struggles. A day to prove he had finally arrived. He had arrived in a way that couldn't be denied. The hall, the guests, the cameras, the laughter swelling around him like waves. The bride's family sat in their section, elegant, composed, glittering with jewelry that didn't need to announce itself, because the confidence already did. His own friends sat scattered among them, men who had once been boys with him, boys who knew how it felt to want something so badly it hurt. And yet standing there, hearing the soft hum of the crowd, feeling the weight of all those eyes, Tund couldn't stop thinking about one thing. His mother, not because she was late, not because she would cause trouble, but because he had learned long ago that the world had a strange way of deciding who deserved to be seen. He swallowed, forcing his shoulders back, forcing the calm onto his face. The photographer called for a small adjustment. Someone laughed near the front row. The wedding coordinator walked past him with a clipboard, like the day could fall apart if she blinked too long. Everything was moving forward exactly as planned. Then his mother walked in, not dramatically, not with a grand entrance. She simply appeared at the doorway, and the room without meaning to shifted. She wore a simple dress. Nothing flashy, nothing new. Just clean, neat, carefully chosen. A modest Ankara print, ironed so carefully the creases looked like devotion. Her headscarf was tied in the way she had tied it for years, secure, practical, dignified. The kind of dignity women learn when they can't afford to fall apart, even when their lives ask them to. Her shoes were plain. Her bag was small. She held it with both hands the way someone holds something precious, not because it's expensive, but because it's all they have. She paused just inside the doorway, not because she was lost, but because she wasn't sure where she belonged. The hall felt too bright, too polished, too unfamiliar. This was not the kind of room she had lived in, not the kind of room she had imagined, back when tomorrow was just an idea she clung to in the dark. She took a breath, slow and controlled, as if she could inhale courage and exhale doubt. Her eyes traveled across the space, faces dressed in confidence, perfume heavy in the air, laughter that came easy, as if some people had never had to earn joy the hard way. She stepped forward. One careful step, then another. The sound of her heels on the polished floor felt louder than it should have, as if the room itself was listening. And then she saw him, her son, standing tall, waiting, beautiful in a way that almost didn't feel real. Tund noticed her at the same moment she noticed him, as if an invisible thread snapped tight between their hearts. His chest tightened, not with fear, with something else. A quiet ache. The kind you feel when the past walks into the future and you realize both of them still know your name. For a moment, the hall faded, the gold lights blurred. The music became distant, and all he could see was her. Not the woman she was today, but the woman she had been for him all his life. He remembered her hands, rough from years of work, cracked from washing clothes in cold water. Hands that had cooked meals from almost nothing and still found a way to make them taste like love. He remembered nights when the power went out and they sat in darkness, listening to the city breathe. He remembered the way she would hum quietly, not because she was happy, but because she refused to let despair have the last sound in the room. He remembered hunger. Not the dramatic hunger people talk about on television, the everyday hunger. The quiet kind. The kind that makes children learn to swallow their needs before they swallow food. He remembered shame. The looks from neighbors when rent was late. The whispers that followed them like shadows. The way people said things like, "That boy will never rise," as if a child's future was a prediction they could make from a woman's poverty. Through it all, she had raised him alone. No husband to lean on, no brother to rescue her. No miracle to reduce the weight she carried. Just her, and him, and a stubborn insistence that tomorrow could still be better. She smiled when she saw him, not the smile of pride. The smile of relief. Relief that she had made it to this day. Relief that she had not died too soon, not broken too early, not given up before seeing the one thing she had built with her own hands stand upright in the world. Her smile said more than words ever could. "Look, you're here, you did it." And Tund, God help him, felt his throat burn. He had told himself he wouldn't cry today. He had told himself he would be a man of calm, a man of composure, a man who could stand in front of a room full of people and look like success without trembling. But the moment his mother's eyes met his, he was no longer the man in the tailored suit. He was the boy again. The boy who had once watched her count coins in her palm like prayers. The boy who had once pretended he wasn't hungry so she would eat. The boy who had once promised himself, silently, that if he ever made it out, he would carry her with him. She kept walking, slow, careful, as if she didn't want to disturb the beauty of the room, as if she had learned, over a lifetime, that her presence could be treated like a burden if she wasn't gentle enough. She adjusted her sleeves, smoothed the front of her dress. Small rituals of survival. She lifted her chin the way Nigerian mothers do when they refuse to be reduced. And still beneath that strength, there was something tender. A softness reserved only for her son. When she finally reached a seat, she didn't sit immediately. She looked back at him one more time. Just once. Her eyes held a quiet message. Not demand. Not expectation. Just love. A love that didn't ask for repayment. A love that didn't require applause. A love that simply said, "I'm here." Tund breathed in. The hall returned. The lights steadied. The music swelled. The wedding coordinator raised a hand. Someone called for everyone to stand. Tund straightened his shoulders and faced forward, his heart still racing, not from fear, but from the weight of meaning pressing against his ribs. Because in that moment, with his mother sitting behind him, watching him with that soft, relieved smile, he understood something he couldn't explain to anyone else in the room. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a finish line she had been running toward for years. And here he was, standing tall, getting married. It started quietly, not with shouting, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. A sentence spoken just loud enough to be heard. A comment. A laugh that lingered too long, refusing to disappear. Then another. Someone from the bride's side leaned forward, lips close to another ear, voice sharpened by curiosity disguised as concern. "Is that really his mother?" The question landed softly. But it did not fall gently. Another voice followed, almost playful. She looks out of place. The pause before the last words did more damage than the words themselves. The laughter spread. Not loud, not careless. It moved carefully, like a blade sliding under skin, precise, intentional, clean. People did not laugh with their mouths. They laughed with their eyes, with raised eyebrows, with exchanged glances, with that shared understanding that something was being judged and that judgment was safe because it wasn't being said out loud. His mother felt it immediately. Her smile froze. Not shattered, just held in place too long. Confusion crossed her face first, soft and uncertain, like a child who thinks she might have misheard. Then embarrassment followed, creeping upward from her chest to her cheeks, warming her skin in a way she had learned to hate. And then, that look appeared. The one she knew too well. The look of someone realizing they are not welcome. It was not new to her. She had worn it in markets when sellers ignored her questions. In offices where her voice was treated like noise. In rooms where her presence was tolerated, but never invited. She stood still, very still, as if movement might make things worse. As if drawing attention to herself could turn the quiet cruelty into something undeniable. Her hands tightened around her purse, not because she was afraid it would be stolen, but because holding anything made her feel anchored. Someone stepped closer to her. A relative from the bride's family. A woman dressed in silk, perfume trailing behind her like a signature. Her makeup was flawless. Her smile was perfect. Her timing was even better. Not rudely, softly. "This is a special occasion." The words were polite. The message was not. They said, "You are not part of this." They said, "You don't belong in the picture." They said, "Know your place." His mother nodded once. A small nod. The kind that accepts something without agreeing to it. She did not argue. She did not ask why. She did not say her son was standing at the front of the room because she had carried him there with her own sacrifices. She did not remind anyone of the nights she had gone without sleep so he could go without hunger. She did not list her qualifications for sitting where she stood. Because women like her learned early that explanations rarely change outcomes, she took a step backward. Then another. Each step felt heavier than the last. Chairs scraped lightly as people shifted to make space, not for her comfort, but for their own ease. No one wanted awkwardness to stain the celebration. This was, after all, a wedding. A day for joy. A day for perfection. Her eyes searched the room, not for help, but for understanding. They did not find it. Instead, they found avoidance. Faces turned away just quickly enough to claim innocence. People stared at their phones, adjusted their clothes, suddenly became fascinated by the ceiling. Anything to avoid being part of something uncomfortable. She reached the back row, the furthest seat, the one closest to the exit, a place chosen for people who might need to leave quietly. She sat down slowly, carefully, as if apologizing for the space she occupied. From there, the room looked different, smaller, colder. The gold lights did not reach this far. She folded her hands in her lap, smoothed her dress again. A habit born from years of being watched too closely. She lifted her head. And that was when the room shifted again, because people noticed, not her, but the direction of her gaze. She was looking forward, toward the altar, toward the man in the tailored suit, toward her son. One by one, heads began to turn, slowly, quietly, like a wave that doesn't crash but still changes the shoreline. Whispers stopped mid-sentence, laughter thinned. Someone cleared their throat. And then, without anyone announcing it, without a word being spoken, all eyes slowly turned to Tund. He felt it then. Not as a thought, not as an idea, but as a physical thing. A tightening in the chest. A pressure behind the ribs. The kind of warning the body gives before the mind finds words. That moment when time pauses. When sound still exists, but becomes distant. When faces move, but feels slowed down. When your life splits into two paths, and you can almost hear the crack forming. He knew what was happening. He didn't need anyone to explain it. He didn't need the whispers to turn into speeches. He had grown up reading rooms the way poor children learn to read weather, by watching tiny signs that promise a storm. He saw his mother's hands tremble, not dramatically, just enough. A small shake in her fingers as she held her purse, as if the leather were the only thing keeping her steady. He saw her eyes search for his, not with anger, not with accusation, with hope, with that quiet trust that had carried her through years of hardship, the belief that her son would recognize her pain even when she didn't name it. She didn't say anything. She never did. His mother had survived a life that taught her a hard lesson. Words could make things worse. Words could invite punishment. Words could attract the kind of attention that didn't come with help. So she stayed quiet. She waited. For him. And that waiting was not weakness. It was love. It was the kind of love that gives someone else the final say because you still believe in their goodness. One word from him would have ended it. Stop, she's my mother. Enough. 3 simple sentences, nothing poetic. Nothing dramatic, just truth. But truth, in that room, carried weight. Truth could crack the perfect image he had paid for. Truth could turn the celebration into an argument. Truth could pull the bride's family out of their polished smiles and expose what they had tried to hide under perfume and silk. And suddenly, Tun's mind, the part of him that had learned to survive the world, grew louder than his heart. Not now, not today. Don't ruin this, because he could already see it. The bride's mother stiffening, the bride's cousins leaning in, hungry for drama. Guests lifting phones higher, eager to record a moment that would live forever online. He could already hear the lines people would repeat later, their voices full of false sympathy. It was such a beautiful wedding. Until he made it messy. He could hear the judgment dressed up as advice. A man should know how to control his household. He could hear the laughter that would follow him into every future room. Can you believe he caused a scene at his own wedding? And there was something else too. Something colder. Fear. Not fear of violence. Fear of losing what he had finally earned. He had fought for this life. He had worked for the suit, the hall, the lights, the respect. He had spent years trying to become the kind of man people nodded at instead of whispering about. He had built himself into someone new. And in one sentence he could tear it all open again. He looked at his mother. He saw the tremble in her hands. He saw the way she held her chin high, trying to protect her dignity with posture alone. He saw the softness in her eyes, the softness she saved only for him. For a second, his heart rose. It pushed against the fear. It begged him to choose her. But the room was heavy. The room was watching. The cameras were recording. The bride was already tense. He could see it in her jaw, the tight smile stretched too far, the way her fingers gripped her bouquet, as if flowers could hold her together. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a performance. And he was the lead actor who had forgotten his lines. He imagined speaking up. He imagined the silence that would follow, the shock, the embarrassment, the confrontation. He imagined the bride's eyes, not soft, not loving, but sharp with betrayal. Why would you do this to me today? He imagined the arguments that would come after, the first crack in the marriage before the vows even settled into memory. And his mind kept repeating the same selfish prayer, not now, not today. So he did the one thing he had trained himself to do when the world became too complicated. He protected the moment. He protected the image. He protected himself. He looked away, not quickly, not dramatically. Just enough to break the connection. Just enough to tell his mother, without words, "You are alone in this." The music continued, soft, beautiful, unbothered. The ceremony moved forward like nothing had happened. And the cruelest part was this. No one had forced him into silence. No one had covered his mouth. No one had threatened him. He chose it. And his silence answered the question he never meant to answer. She left early. Not in a way that drew attention, not with a scene, not with tears anyone could point to later and say, that was the moment. She simply stood when the applause was meant for someone else, quietly, without goodbye. She adjusted her headscarf one last time, smoothing it down as if it had somehow failed her. She picked up her purse, the same small purse she had carried through years of markets and bus stops and borrowed rooms. She took one step, then another, careful not to brush against anyone, careful not to disturb the celebration she had already been pushed to the edge of. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. People were too busy smiling. From the front of the hall, Tun didn't see her leave at first. He was surrounded, hands shaking his, voices congratulating him, laughter spilling over champagne glasses. Someone clapped him on the shoulder. Someone else pulled him into a quick embrace. "Very impressive ceremony," a man said. "Your mother raised you well," another added, without realizing the irony. By the time Tun glanced toward the back of the room, the seat was empty. For a brief second, panic flickered in his chest, then he dismissed it. She understands, he told himself. She always understands. She was strong. She always had been. Strong enough to walk long distances when transport money ran out. Strong enough to stretch meals so a growing boy could eat twice. Strong enough to swallow humiliation without letting it poison her love. If anyone could handle a moment like this, it was her. That's what he told himself. The wedding went on. Music rose and fell. Plates were filled and cleared. Laughter grew louder as the night deepened. Dances followed. Cheers erupted when the couple took the floor, moving carefully at first, then with more confidence as the crowd encouraged them. Someone wiped a happy tear. Someone shouted blessings in Yoruba. Cameras flashed, freezing joy into images that would be shared and reshared. Tun smiled when he was supposed to. He laughed on cue. He played his role perfectly. People noticed. They always do. "You handled that well," someone said, leaning in close, voice low and approving. "Very mature, mature." The word landed like praise, warm and heavy. He nodded, accepted it, let it settle over him like a medal. He smiled back. Because smiling was easier than explaining the tightness in his chest. Because smiling didn't invite questions. Because smiling allowed the night to continue uninterrupted. And so it did. Hours later, when the last guests finally drifted away and the hall emptied of its noise, the beauty remained, but it felt different now. The lights were dimmer. The flowers had begun to wilt at the edges. Chairs sat unevenly, abandoned where people had risen too quickly. Tun stood still in the quiet. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow, not broken, just missing. As if something essential had slipped out without anyone noticing. Back at the hotel room, the laughter didn't follow them inside. Shoes were kicked off. Jackets were draped over chairs. The night slowed, the way nights always do when celebration gives way to reality. Tun sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time all day, no one was watching him. That was when the weight returned, not all at once, piece by piece. He thought of the empty seat, the way she hadn't looked back, the fact that he hadn't gone after her. He reached for his phone, hesitated, then typed, "Are you okay?" He stared at the message longer than he needed to, as if the words might change if he waited. He pressed send. The screen glowed briefly, then went still. Minutes passed. He checked the time, checked the signal, checked the phone again. Nothing. He told himself she was probably tired, probably asleep, probably didn't hear the phone. He set it down, picked it back up. Still nothing. The room felt colder than before. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of electricity through the walls. In the quiet, memories surfaced without permission, her voice calling his name at dusk, the sound of her footsteps in the morning, the way she always answered, even when she was busy, even when she was tired. This time she didn't. The phone remained dark. No vibration, no notification, no reassurance. Just silence. And for the first time since the ceremony began, Tund felt something close to fear, not of scandal, not of judgment, but of a truth he had been avoiding all day. Silence doesn't always mean understanding. Sometimes it means distance. He checked the phone one last time. No reply. Days passed. Not in dramatic leaps. Not with apologies or confrontations or late-night confessions. They passed the way days usually do, quietly, almost politely, as if nothing important had been left unresolved. Then weeks followed. Tund got busy. Work filled his mornings. Marriage filled his evenings. Life filled the spaces in between. There were meetings to attend, emails to answer, small decisions to make together, what to eat, where to go, which furniture to buy, how to arrange a future that was suddenly shared. People congratulated him often. Some were still talking about the wedding, replaying it like a highlight reel. Beautiful ceremony, they said. Everything went perfectly. He nodded. He smiled. He let the words pass through him without settling. At night, when the house grew quiet, he sometimes thought about calling her, not with urgency, not with panic, just a simple call. A check-in, the kind he had made 1,000 times before. But he always told himself the same thing. Soon. He would visit soon. He always did. She understood that life got busy. She understood that marriage changed routines. She understood everything. That was what made it easy to wait. So he waited. He sent a message once, then another, days later. No reply. He told himself her phone might be off. That network coverage was unreliable in her area. That silence didn't always mean something was wrong. Sometimes it just meant patience was required. Weeks passed like that. Careful, measured, deceptively normal. Until one morning the phone rang, not his wife's ringtone. Not a colleague's number, not a name he recognized. An unfamiliar number. He hesitated before answering. Hello? The voice on the other end was a woman's, older, unsteady, careful with each word, as if choosing the wrong one could cause damage. It took Tund a second to recognize her. A neighbor. Someone who had lived near his mother for years. Someone who had borrowed salt and returned it twice. Someone whose voice carried familiarity without closeness. Tund? The woman asked. Yes, he said. There was a pause, a long one. She collapsed, the woman said finally. 2 words. Softly spoken. Heavy. They tried, she added quickly, as if speed might soften the meaning. They did everything they could. The room felt suddenly smaller. Tund stood still, phone pressed to his ear, listening to details that refused to arrange themselves into something logical. A time, a place, a rushed trip to the hospital. Neighbors gathering, someone calling for help. He heard the words. But they felt far away, disconnected, like a story happening to someone else. He didn't remember hanging up. He didn't remember putting on his shoes. He didn't remember the drive, only the hospital. The smell of antiseptic, the harsh white lights. The way silence settled into corridors meant for movement. The hospital room was quiet, too quiet. Machines hummed softly, their rhythm steady and indifferent. Curtains were drawn halfway, as if even the room itself was unsure how much should be revealed. She lay there, smaller than he remembered. Her body seemed to have folded inward, as though life had been gently but firmly withdrawn. Her hands rested at her sides, still, finally free of their trembling. The lines on her face looked deeper, not from age, but from effort, from endurance. Tund stepped closer. Each step felt wrong. Too slow, too late. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, to say the words he had saved for soon. But the room did not wait for him to be ready. A doctor approached. A man with tired eyes and a voice trained to soften bad news. He spoke gently, as doctors do when gentleness is all they have left to offer. She asked for you, he said. Just that, no long explanation, no medical language, no attempt to prepare him. She asked for you. The words moved through Tund like a crack splitting open. Suddenly, the weeks collapsed, the busyness, the excuses, the assumption that time was something he owned. He saw her sitting alone at the back of the wedding hall. Saw the way she had left without goodbye. Saw the unanswered messages, the dark screen, the waiting. All the moments he had told himself were harmless. All the silences he had mistaken for strength. He reached for her hand. It was cold. The quiet in the room pressed closer. And for the first time since the wedding day, for the first time since he chose to look away, the silence spoke back. That was when the silence broke. At the funeral, there was no music. No choir warming the air. No drums to carry grief forward. No hymns rising to soften the weight of goodbye. Just dirt and unanswered questions. The ground was dry, cracked in places where the sun had been too honest for too long. A small crowd gathered at a respectful distance, neighbors, distant relatives, women who had known her by routine rather than intimacy. They murmured prayers under their breath, the kind learned by heart and spoken by reflex. Tund stood apart. Not because anyone pushed him there, but because loneliness has a way of choosing its own space. No crowd pressed around him. No cameras searched for his face. No applause waited for the right moment. Only him and the truth. The coffin rested quietly, its polished surface reflecting the sky in fragments. It looked heavier than it should have, as if it carried not just a body, but years of endurance folded inside. A life measured in sacrifices that never made headlines. A love that never demanded recognition. The priest spoke briefly, words about strength, words about faith, words about a woman who gave everything for her son. Each sentence landed gently and still managed to cut. Tund listened without moving. He did not cry. Not because he didn't feel the loss, but because something deeper than tears had settled into him. Regret. The kind that doesn't rush out. The kind that stays. As the coffin was lowered, the sound of soil hitting wood filled the silence. Dull. Final. Each handful of dirt felt like punctuation ending something that could never be revised. That was when his mind began to replay it. The wedding. Not the celebration. Not the laughter. The moment. The look. The choice. He saw her again, standing just inside the hall, dress carefully ironed, hope balanced delicately on her smile. He saw her eyes searching for him, not demanding, just asking. He remembered how easy it had been to look away. How simple it felt to tell himself later. How convincing silence can sound when it pretends to be peace. He had believed silence would protect everyone. Protect the bride from embarrassment. Protect the guests from discomfort. Protect himself from judgment. But standing there, watching dirt cover the last woman who had ever loved him without condition, he understood what silence had truly done. It had protected nothing. It had merely delayed the cost. A breeze passed through the cemetery, stirring dust and fabric. Somewhere, a child laughed, life continuing without permission. Tund felt the weight of that truth settle into his chest. Silence is never neutral. It doesn't float above morality. It doesn't wait patiently for the right time. It chooses. It sides with power. It sides with comfort. It sides with whatever keeps the moment intact. And that day, in a hall filled with flowers and gold light, he had chosen the wrong one. He didn't lose his mother because he was cruel. Cruelty would have been easier to understand. Cruelty has a shape, a sound, a moment people can point to and say, that's where it went wrong. But that wasn't what happened. He lost her because he was comfortable. Because comfort whispers instead of shouts. Because it doesn't feel dangerous in the moment. Because it dresses itself as patience, as wisdom, as restraint. Because comfort tells you there will be time later. Tund stood at the edge of his life and chose the option that asked the least of him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't defend her. He didn't say her name out loud when it mattered most. He simply stayed quiet. And the world rewarded him for it. The wedding stayed beautiful. The guests stayed smiling. The music never stopped. People praised his maturity. They admired his composure. They called him a man who knew how to keep peace. No one called it what it really was: silence. In the days that followed, life continued the way life always does when it hasn't been personally wounded. People went back to work. Conversations shifted. New stories replaced old ones. Only one absence remained permanent. His mother was gone. Not in anger, not in blame, but in the quiet, irreversible way that leaves no space for correction. He thought of all the moments he had believed silence was harmless. All the times he told himself, this isn't the right place. This isn't the right time. This isn't worth the trouble. He realized something too late. Silence had never been neutral. It had taken sides long before he noticed. It had sided with the room, with the image, with the comfort of everyone watching. It had left the person who needed him most to stand alone. And that is how loss truly happens, not in a single act of cruelty, but in a series of small, reasonable decisions that feel safe until they are final. So here's the question this story leaves behind. If silence can protect you in public, keep your image clean, your moment intact, your comfort undisturbed, but destroy you in private, haunting your nights, replaying the moment you looked away, standing beside you at a grave where words no longer matter, what does it really cost to say nothing?